Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Good morning. It is 5:07 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We call it a Good Friday around these parts. Good morning, folks. Glad you're listening to us. You've got me, Patrice Onwuka, your usual Friday co-host here. And I've got a special guest. I'm in for Larry, but we've got a special guest host today. We've got Hans von Spakovsky. Good morning, Hans.
Good morning, Patrice. And I can confirm to everybody that we are not in our pajamas, since I can see you today instead of talking to you on the phone.
Exactly. We are dressed for the occasion,
That's
and we
right.
have a lot to get to. I can't wait to dig into so much of the election stuff with you. Well, at 6:35, we've got one of your colleagues, Zach Smith, Senior Fellow and Manager of the Supreme Court and Appellate Advocacy Program at Heritage Foundation. 7:05, Tony Schaefer, former Grand Marshal and board member of the National Veterans Parade Foundation. He'll be joining us at 7:35. Bram Weinstein, he's going to preview this weekend's games and for the Commanders. And at 8:05, Governor Kristi Noem, Governor of South Dakota, is going to be joining us. And then at 8:35, we will hopefully have Brett Baer, anchor of Special Report at Fox News, to preview, to talk about this weekend and what's going looking forward. So, Hans, let's get right into this. This has been, what a week it's been.
Boy, it sure has, hasn't it?
What a week it's been. We've had it. Finally, the 2024
Right.
four-year election cycle came to a close, and I feel like this past year has just been so many ups and downs. It's been a roller coaster ride, so it's wonderful to have you with us. I can't wait to hear from you. Just your overall reaction to the election and this week.
You know, one of the most interesting things to me is, look, going into Election Day, it seemed like it was still a toss-up, right? The polling seemed to indicate it was all so close, and the end result instead is a sweep of the Electoral College. Now, as you know, we're still waiting for two states, Arizona and Nevada, and the fact we're still waiting tells you a lot about the quality of the people administering elections there and their rules. But I'll tell you something else. Every year before elections, where I work at the Heritage Foundation, we get a lot of foreign delegations.
Oh, really?
You know,
Okay.
and I end up talking to all of them because I all want to know about the election. We got more foreign delegations this year than in the whole time I've been in Washington.
Really?
Yeah. The outside world was really, really interested. And in fact, every American election, the EU sends European observers to watch our elections. And I usually end up giving them a briefing. There were more EU observers here this year, again, than in any prior presidential election.
Really?
Yeah.
So what do you think drew them here? Was it because of this race was that consequential or that uncertain? And did you get a sense from the different delegations who they thought was really going to win?
No, they were just as stuck as everybody else was based on the polling. And look, there's such a difference. There was such a difference between the two candidates, particularly on foreign policy issues, that, they really wanted to know if Trump won. I mean, they pretty much knew what Kamala Harris would do if she got elected. Yeah. But they really wanted to know, well, what is Trump going to do if he's elected? Who's going to be the Secretary of State? Who's going to be the Defense Secretary? And what's going to happen in places like Ukraine, the Middle East, all the hot spots that we have going on right now?
You know, Hans, it's been so interesting to see the fact that we still don't have all of the races called yet.
Yes.
You kind of teased it a little bit. Nevada and Arizona, correct, are still our holdouts. What do you think is going on there?
Well, part of the problem in both of those states is that, well, like Nevada, a couple of years ago we premiered what we call our election integrity scorecard at the Heritage Foundation. We analyze how good or how bad the laws are regulating elections in each state. Yes. The 50th worst state in the country is Nevada. And part of their problem is they mail out an absentee ballot to every single registered voter. And it takes a lot longer to process and count.
Absolutely.
Absentee ballots. Arizona, Maricopa County, you know all the problems they've had there. Starting in 2020, they had problems again in 2022, and they just haven't fixed those problems.
And apparently, I guess they're not going to be fixing those problems.
I don't think so. They've been, the election officials there have been very resistant to all kinds of criticism, and I think we're going to continue to have problems there.
So, I mean, that said, do you think that the tea leaves are leaning in either direction for either of those races?
Yeah, both of those look like they're going to go towards Trump's camp.
Okay. Which would make a clean sweep of all of the battleground states for President Trump.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? When not amazing in terms of Trump attracting the voters, but again, amazing in how wrong the polling was.
Well, and that's the thing. So what's interesting is I think some of the betting websites, I think Kalashi is one of those, but
Right.
lots of those betting websites had Trump leading by over 60%, his likelihood of winning. They seem to have done better than all of the polling, including the Real Clear Politics average, which I think had Trump up by less than half a point. The margin was ridiculously close. And then some of these other polls suggested that it was still a coin toss. There's something about the betting system, I guess, that is stronger than maybe our polling system. What do you think? And I don't think it's the quiet Trump supporter anymore. Do you? Why did the polls get it wrong again?
I think I really think it's because, first of all, so many conservatives, so many Republican voters, they don't trust the pollsters. They don't necessarily want to answer questions or answer them truthfully. And I got to tell you, when people look, the kind of civil violence we've seen,
Yes.
it's all almost all come from the left over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
And I know lots of people who were supporters of Trump, but they were afraid, for example, to put signs in their yards because they were afraid that their cars
Yes.
would get vandalized, or houses too. I don't think Democrats had that fear. And so I think a lot of people, when pollsters call them, they don't want to say that they actually were supporting Trump because they were afraid of the backlash.
Well, it's so funny because I think, did I tell folks yesterday we decided to put out our Trump signs the morning that he won? And we live in PG County, and we're surrounded by a lot of Harris Waltz signs. But I suspect that there are more people who think like us and, again, want to keep it quiet because you don't know if your neighbor works for a county or a state or a federal agency that can utilize their powers against you. Maybe the tide is turning in that way.
Yeah, but I think that really hurt pollsters because I just don't think – I don't think they got all the people – who supported Trump wanting to admit that on the phone to some anonymous caller. Because remember, that's how polling works, right?
That's right.
Some anonymous person is calling you up, and you're like going, well, yeah, maybe you are the pollster, maybe you're not.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll continue to see. At this point, maybe they're not going to be able to get it any better than what they've got now.
Right.
There's got to be a way, though, to be able to speak to regular folks. And perhaps part of why people are fearful of speaking out is also the way that the media treats Trump supporters,
that
treats
is right.
Republicans. And maybe if the media were to shift and at least be a little less biased towards how they report and talk about about Trump supporters, maybe that will filter out across the culture and society, and people will feel less either you feel like a lion and you have to throw on all of your MAGA garb, or you're just the quiet person that doesn't want to draw any ire. There's got to be a middle ground there. Yeah. And I mean, maybe we'll get there. Do you foresee that happening?
Maybe, but not if the attitudes. Look, we've already seen the attitudes don't seem to be changing of places like MSNBC and elsewhere. I mean, who was it? We just heard a Democratic congresswoman saying, "Oh yeah, I wasn't kidding. He's going to set up internment camps." That is so outrageously absurd.
Talk about misinformation and disinformation. We're going to get to more with Hans. I've got a million questions for you, but right now we're going to take it to traffic. It's 5:15.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
All right, so let's just set the table. Let's get everybody back on the same wavelength about where we are with the different standings. We had, I think, a couple of key races called, but let's see where we're at. So right now, we know that President Trump is projected to win He has, I believe, 295 electoral votes compared to 226 for Kamala Harris. Right now, it looks like the House has not yet been called, but it seems like it's going to stay in Republicans' hands right now. But we still have a couple of races that have yet to be called, and in the Senate, Republicans have won. I believe we have got 53 Republican senators, and so the Republicans will now be controlling the Senate. At least we know that, and the presidency, and the House very likely.
Yeah, and that getting control of the Senate is crucial to Trump being able to have his executive branch function.
Yes.
Because, as you know, in the last administration, Democrats did everything they could to hold up all his cabinet picks, judges, et cetera. And with Republicans now in control, he can actually get people into, for example, the Department of Defense, Department of Justice that he wants there.
Yes. And that's important because you can't pass an America First agenda. You can't get judges, you can't get cabinet members approved, you can't get people down the line that you want in and those who are already sitting out without that. And so it's great to have a great agenda lined up, but who's going to enact it if you don't have the kind of support in the Senate that you need to get through?
Yeah, and that's really crucial for the Senate. And, look, the Republicans, it looks like, are going to control the House. Very small margin. But again, boy, that's really important when it comes to making changes in the executive branch. And boy, there need to be a lot of changes and a lot of reforms and a lot of cleanup of places like the FBI and the Justice Department.
You know, we'll get into some of the potential cabinet picks. We'll get into some of the Trump agenda. We've heard from President Trump himself, J.D. Vance, talk about what the Trump administration plans to do very early in the administration. But just to kind of tie the bow on the last holdouts of Arizona and Nevada, when do you think they're actually going to be, these races are going to be called there?
I don't know. You know, Arizona prior to the election was saying it could take them 2 weeks.
Arizona, 2 weeks?
Yeah, 2 weeks in Maricopa County to keep counting and getting to the final stages of tabulation. And, you know, part of the problem is the election there is so close that it's even, you know, Fox's desk where they keep projecting who's going to win. They still haven't projected Nevada or Arizona,
which is interesting because Fox was one of the first one of the first networks to really start projecting both the Trump win as well as some of these calling a lot of races. So, Hans, when we look back at 2020 and all of the legislative changes that made possible, I think, contributed to President Biden winning.
Yes.
Did we see anything overturn in some of those election laws, or did some of those emergency changes expire, which kind of fed what we saw on Tuesday night?
Let me tell you the biggest factors I think that helped Trump. I mean, besides the fact that he attracted so many voters.
Sure.
First of all, one of the only good things that came out of the 2020 election were that there were a lot of state legislators that finally realized, you know, there are vulnerabilities in the election process and we need to fix them. And that led to a large number of states passing big reform packages. You'll recall Georgia was one of them.
Yes.
And remember,
the MLB.
Yes.
All of these corporations wanted to boycott Florida because of the changes to the election laws.
Right. And remember, Joe Biden went down to Atlanta and said this reform package was Jim Crow 2.0.
That's
which,
right.
of course, he's been proven wrong given they've had record registration and turnout. Yeah.
Yes.
But those reforms really helped. You'll notice in this election, there was no dispute about what happened in Georgia, no dispute about North Carolina.
Although Stacey Abrams, I'm sure she's still saying that there is voter suppression somewhere in Georgia.
But then the other big thing that happened was, remember, in the last election, at the last moment, Democrats would file these lawsuits and get judges and election officials to change the rules that had been put in place by the state legislature.
Wow.
This time, the RNC and the Trump campaign were ready for that. They built up their litigation shops. They were going to court immediately to stop that kind of thing. You'll recall we had a county in Pennsylvania that the rule in every state is if you're standing in line when the poll closes, you get to vote.
Yes.
And there was a county that said when the poll time closed, they told everybody to go home.
That is voter suppression.
Yeah, it is. But the difference was the Trump campaign, they were in court immediately. And they got a judge to reverse that and tell the county, you can't do that. In fact, you now have to have extended hours to make up for that. And they did that all over the country. They were ready for the litigation battle this year, and they weren't in 2020.
I think there's so many differences in how the Trump the Trump campaign really ran and was prepared in a way that they weren't necessarily focused in 2020 and in 2016. They really didn't. We are speaking with Hans von Spakovsky. He's my co-host today. I'm actually feeling some pretty big shoes. I'm in for Larry O'Connor. You know me. It's their Friday gal, Patrice Onwuka. We're going to take a quick break and come back and talk a little bit more about elections because we've got the election guru right here.
Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:37 News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Good Friday morning to everybody. This is O'Connor and Company. I know this is not the voice of Larry O'Connor, but you know my voice. It's Patrice Onwuka. And I'm here today with Hans von Spakovsky, a friend of the show and the election guru. Sitting in. Good morning, Hans.
Good morning, Patrice. Great to be in studio with you. Instead of, normally I'm sitting at my kitchen table on the phone talking to you.
Exactly. Well, we have you in person, in the flesh. At 6:35, we've got one of your colleagues, Zach Smith, Senior Legal Fellow and Manager of the Supreme Court and Appellate Advocacy Program at Heritage Foundation. 7:05, Tony Schaefer, former Grand Marshal and board member of the National Veterans Parade Foundation. At 7:35, Bram Weinstein, he's going to preview this weekend's Commanders game. 8:05, Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota is going to be joining us. And 8:35, Brett Baird will round us out from Fox News Channel. All right, so we've got some we already have insights into the Trump administration, who is going to be making the decisions, who's going to be running the shop, so to speak. Yesterday, we learned that Susie Wiles, she is the campaign manager, co-campaign manager for the Trump campaign, had a massive victory, and now she is going to be tapped as the chief of staff. President Trump has selected her for his campaign manager, as I mentioned, to be chief of staff. She actually comes from Florida. She used to work for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, helping secure his gubernatorial win in the past. And so she has, interestingly, her father, the late Pat Summerall, was a famous sports broadcaster. And Wiles has been working really behind the scenes in a lot of ways, shaping Florida politics. Actually, Hans, do you know Susie Wiles?
I don't know her, and I congratulate her on getting the post. I hope she realizes just what a battle she's going to face with the federal bureaucracy. We always refer to it as the swamp. It's a real thing.
Yes.
And I would estimate probably 90% of the career civil service people in Washington and all the federal agencies will be doing everything they can to fight what the White House is telling them they need to be doing.
Resistance 2.0, you mean?
It is.
Yep.
And when they are unsuccessful in resisting, what their second step is? They call up their friends at the Washington Post and other places and leak information because they don't think the ethics rules on confidentiality, particularly on the Justice Department, they don't think it applies to them.
Funny how civil servants who are not elected feel that way.
Yeah.
So Susie Wiles, she is going to be the first woman to ever hold the position of White House Chief of Staff. I'm looking forward to the cover spreads on all of the major women's magazines on her, but we never saw one of Melania Trump, so I'm not holding my breath.
Well, wait a minute. I thought Donald Trump didn't like having strong women around him. Wait a minute, he's got a woman as Chief of Staff? Gosh.
Tell that to Mark Cuban. And interesting. So you talk about the job itself, and the role of the chief of staff is really to manage all of the people coming in and out of the White House, all of the people who are going to be delivering information to the president. And you're talking about hundreds of people that also just work at the White House. And so kind of really protecting President Trump. If you guys don't have, if you've forgotten, we've had some interesting chief of staffs President Trump did in his first administration. John Kelly, Mark Meadows, Reince Priebus was there for a while, Mick Mulvaney. So he had 4 chief of staffs, and hopefully it will take a woman to do the job, in Nikki Haley's words, and hopefully she will be able to do what I think some of these other chief of staff struggled to do, which was really to manage the voices around the president.
Yeah, that is probably besides being president, that's the toughest job in the White House. Because the White House itself has literally hundreds of personnel, and you're talking about a federal government that's got, I think, 2.2 million.
Wow,
employees. It's gigantic. I mean, it's our federal government has more people than some countries.
Yes,
population.
Absolutely. So interestingly, CNN is reporting an interesting detail about this idea of managing the people around the president. CNN is reporting that when she was being considered and talked to, presented the opportunity, she said, quoting a close source, quote, "The clown car can't come through the White House at all." And he agrees with her. Hans, who is on the clown car? Who is she what clown car is she trying to keep out of the White House? Who do you think? Or generally, what perspectives is she talking about there?
Well, I think what it may be is, look, the biggest problem Trump had in his last administration were people who they liked the attention and the attraction of having a government post, but they weren't actually interested in doing real work, the kind of conservative, principled work that needs to be done, because, oh my gosh, if they did, the editorial page of the New York Times might criticize them. The biggest thing, you know what the first qualification ought to be?
What?
The first qualification ought to be getting people into, for example, cabinet posts who, if the New York Times and Washington Post are approving of what they're doing, they realize, man, I must be doing the wrong thing.
So they don't care about appeasing the media, which is already out to get President Trump, and I'm sure is already crafting the next narrative.
No, that should be besides whatever their professional qualifications are, that's got to be the first requirement for anybody that they're considering for a post.
So here's what President-elect Donald Trump said. "Susie Wild just helped me achieve one of the greatest political victories in American history. Facts. And she was an integral part of both my 2016 and 2020 successful campaigns. Susie is tough, smart, innovative, and is universally admired and respected. She will work tirelessly to make America great again. I have no doubt that she will make our country proud." Those are very high marks from President Trump.
Well, it is, and that's a very high standard to live up to.
Exactly. Well, we will see who else is going to be joining Susie Wiles, but we'll have more on that. It is 5:43.
Why do the Democrats seem so angry that our border might be secured and the war in Ukraine might end? Later today on The Chris Plant Show.
All right, so Hans, let's continue talking about potential cabinet members for the Trump administration. We are seeing here reporting, this is out of Politico, that Elise Stefanik from New York, representative and top official in Congress right now on the Republican House side, she is being considered for ambassador to the United Nations.
Yeah, the post that Nikki Haley had.
Yes, another strong woman there.
I mean, she'd be good for that, but I'd hate to potentially lose that Republican seat out of New York. We don't have that many in New York.
Yeah, and I think we lost at least one over the past week.
Right.
So there's a long list here of potential folks. Elon Musk, for example. We saw Elon Musk throw so much of his time and energy and money into helping President Trump, and he has said he's been interested in serving to cut the waste in government.
Boy, that is such an important task. It doesn't matter what area you're talking about. Usually there's like 100 different programs, all that have been passed at different times, like all doing the same thing.
Yes. And that kind of duplication. And then at the same time, they still do not solve the problem.
That's right.
That they exist exist for. Robert Kennedy Jr., huge. This was, if there was a realignment, he represents the old establishment Democratic Blue Dog Party moving into the Trump campaign or Trump camp. And potentially he would oversee maybe the FDA or some sort of HHS, maybe some sort of agency where he's overseeing food and health and other things. What do you think of that pick?
Well, that's going to be probably a bit controversial, particularly to his own family. You know what I find most interesting about that is and you remember Rush Limbaugh used to talk about this. If you go back and look at the things that John F. Kennedy pushed, lower taxes,
yes,
strong defense.
Yes.
I mean, he would have been a Republican today.
That's how far the left has gone radical.
That's exactly right.
That's exactly right. So Stephen Miller, this is a name. He's been part of the previous Trump administration as senior advisor to President Trump.
Right.
Really the architect behind a lot of the immigration policies before. Potentially, he could be in a role that would that would help to oversee immigration policies, and we'll talk about that a little later in the show. But could he be confirmed if it was a cabinet position?
Well, that's why the Republicans taking control of the Senate was so crucial, was being able to actually get people like him into the cabinet.
Rick Grinnell, a good friend of the show, former member of the Trump administration before. He was the ambassador to Germany, acting director of intelligence. Do you think he would serve can you see him in a greater post under the Trump administration this time around?
Yeah, particularly because it's really important for Trump to get somebody good running our entire intelligence operation, because we've had so many bad people, not only folks who lack judgment, but just think about all the intelligence officials, former intelligence officials who did everything they could to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story, basically abusing their prior positions as intelligence officials for political advantage.
You know, and if not in the intelligence side, I wouldn't mind him in the State Department. Yeah. I mean, when you talk about all of the conflicts, the fires that we're facing right now, I think we need someone better than Antony Blinken. And, you know, I could see Rick Grinnell doing a great job filling that role there. Let's see. There's so many names on this list. Senator Marco Rubio. What do you think about losing him from Florida and moving him somewhere in the administration? Apparently, he's in the mix for Secretary of State.
Look, I think he'd be good at that job. But again, the margin, the majority margin that the Republicans are going to have in the Senate is small.
Yeah.
And they'd probably elect another Republican senator in Florida if he left. But still, I'd hate to lose him.
I know what you mean. But you know what, Marco Rubio, former adversary for President Trump, at least on the campaign trail in 2020 or 2016. And to see his evolution, to see him come around to be such a ardent, vocal supporter of President Trump and for the Trump America First policies, it's been really wonderful. And I love that he talks about the men and young men being so left out of society, and how do you re-engage them from a workforce perspective, or from all these different ways that really start to build back up young men who feel left behind. Right. So I would love to see him in a pretty prominent role. I mean, there are a number of names on the list that are going to be floated around. I'm sure we're going to be seeing leaks here and there, other names. Interested in where Tulsi Gabbard, if there would be a role for a Tulsi Gabbard.
Right. And they're talking about Mike Pompeo potentially for Department of Defense.
That would be a really good one.
Yep. Having a West Point grad actually running the Defense Department instead of some socially liberal guy who knows absolutely nothing about the military. Boy, what a welcome change that would be.
You know, Hans, what I love is that number one, I think we can kill DEI and wokeness throughout all of these agencies, take that equity lens and just smash it with a hammer and get rid of that, and then start to whittle down the size of government so that it serves its purpose, not trying to social engineer society. That's what I look forward to with the Trump administration. So we're going to be getting more on this. You are here with Hans von Spakovsky and me, Patrice Onwuka. We are taking you into this Friday weekend, going into Veterans Holiday this weekend. It is 5:53.